Imagine training for the Olympics and then nobody ever tells you how fast you ran or how high you jumped. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that's exactly how most team members in small businesses go to work every single day. And then we wonder why good people drift. Welcome to the Business Mountain podcast. I'm Ginny Seeley, business strategist and longtime process improvement expert. My husband Joe and I own an appliance service business and a co-working space, so I know firsthand what it takes to juggle growth, leadership, family, and faith all at once. Every week, we climb together with real-world strategy, smart marketing, and practical tech for service-based business owners. Grab your gear, let's climb. Hello, my friend, and welcome back. So Joe and I just came off evaluation season at Cavalry Appliance. We do these twice a year unless we're onboarding somebody new, and then we do it a little more often in the beginning, traditionally once after the second quarter, and then once at the end of the year or at the very beginning of the year to sum up the whole entire year before. Every single member of our team, one at a time, face to face. A printed document on the table between us that we both sign before we stand up. And I want to tell you something about those conversations because I think it might surprise you. They're not dreaded as much as our team acts like they are dreading them. They're not. Nobody walks in there with their shoulders up around their ears. There's no tension in the room. No ambush is waiting on the other side of the door. These are some of the best conversations we have all year. We laugh in them, we celebrate inside the room, we get honest in them, and every single person walks out knowing exactly where they stand, exactly what they're doing well, and exactly what we're working on together next. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When I talk with business owners in our community about team evaluations, the reaction I get is almost never, "Oh yeah, we do those." The reaction I get is somewhere between a wince and a full-body cringe. And when I ask why, the answers all rhyme. It feels too corporate for our shop size. I see my guys every single day. They know how they're doing. Or I don't want it to get awkward. I wouldn't even know what to put on the form. We're just too busy. I don't have time for that. And I get it, truly. When your whole world is keeping the schedule full, keeping customers happy, and keeping the trucks rolling, a formal sit-down evaluation feels like something big companies with HR departments do. It feels like paperwork for the sake of paperwork. And I know it's a real challenge, even for my own husband, Joe, to just have regular other kinds of meetings. So I get it. Nobody, especially people in the trades, like to sit around a table and have meetings. But here's the thing. A pattern I keep seeing in our community is that the business struggling most with their teams, the ones that are dealing with turnover, with standards slipping, with that one employee who's coasting and everybody knows it, those businesses are always the ones where nobody has ever sat down and had a structured, honest, and documented conversation about performance. Not once. Not ever. And I'll tell you, I get it because coming from the healthcare industry and understanding that some of the people on my team had dozens and dozens of evaluations to do, and it takes a lot of time. It's stressful. Sometimes people walk away unhappy, so it can feel awkward, but it's so important. The businesses where the team is super solid, where people stay, where they take ownership, where the owner can actually leave for a week, those businesses are the ones where feedback is flowing. It's built in, it's expected, it's normal. And that's not a coincidence, my friend. So today, I'm going to talk about what actually works, and I'm going to pull back the curtain and show you a little bit about how we do our evaluations for our team members right here at Cavalry Appliance. So one of the problems that people have with doing evaluations is the perception that the problem is confrontation. People avoid evaluations because they imagine an uncomfortable conversation where they have to sit there and criticize someone they like, someone they work beside every day, maybe someone they go to church with. So they put it off, and then they put it off again. But the real problem isn't confrontation. The real problem is silence. And silence is doing damage in your business right now, today, whether you can see it or not. Think about what silence communicates. Your best team member, the one who shows up early, who treats your customers like gold, who quietly fixes problems behind the scenes before you even ever hear about them. When was the last time that person heard, in plain words, spoken aloud, I see what you do, here's exactly what it means to this business, and here's where you're headed? If you can't remember, then neither can they. And people cannot run on fumes forever. Even the great ones eventually start to wonder if anyone notices what they're doing. And when a competitor calls, and in the trades, my friend, competitors are calling, and they feel like someone finally noticed them, that is one of the most powerful recruiting pitches in the world. Now flip it. Your struggling team member, the one who's sloppy on paperwork or short with customers or just not growing. Silence tells them everything's fine. Every week you say nothing, you're endorsing their current standard. And then one day you snap over something small, and from their side of the table it comes out of nowhere. Because as far as they knew, everything was fine. You had the data in your mind, but they never got it. Ken Blanchard, the author of The 1 Minute Manager, one of the best-selling business books of all time, has a line I love. He says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. He actually credits it to a colleague of his named Rick Tate. And the way Tate explained it is the picture I opened with. Imagine training for the Olympics with no one telling you how fast you ran or how high you jumped. It's absurd in sports. And yet, that's the daily reality for millions of working people. And the research backs this up in a big way. Gallup, the polling and workplace research organization, has found that 80% of employees who received meaningful feedback in the past week describe themselves as fully engaged at work. 80%. They've also found that people who strongly agree they get valuable feedback are dramatically less likely to be burned out and far less likely to be job hunting. I want you to listen to that again through the lens of a service business owner. Feedback is a retention tool. Feedback is a recruiting tool. Feedback is a profit tool. And it costs you like nothing but intention and a little bit of your time. So if you've been avoiding evaluations because they feel confrontational, the silence you've been keeping to avoid one uncomfortable conversation is quietly creating dozens of invisible ones. You're not protecting your team from discomfort. You're withholding the one thing that would help them grow. And you're actually making them feel more uncomfortable because they're kind of left in the dark. One of the things that I like to think about is, especially in the healthcare environment, especially during COVID and going through all that while I was working at the hospital, the more you don't say anything at all to people, the more they create in their mind what they think you might be thinking. So having clear, regular conversations where people know what to expect, you've outlined really clearly all of the expectations you have for them. You outline really clearly exactly how you're going to measure whether they do a good job or not a good job. All of that, they need to know that. People need to understand what they can do and how they can affect the outcome of their evaluation. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do it at Cavalry Appliance. I'm going to walk you up the mountain on this one because in the Business Mountain Framework, this is in the team development, team engagement area, and it shows up in your tracking pillar too under your HR KPIs. So here's the mountain picture. When a rope team is climbing, they don't just tie in at base camp, wish each other luck, and then never speak again until the summit. They check in at set points along the route. How's your footing? How's your energy? Here's what's ahead. That rhythm of checking in is what makes it safe to keep climbing together. A team member evaluation is the same exact thing. It's a scheduled check-in point on a climb that you're all making together. Now let me break down how we do ours because this is the exact system Joe and I use at Cavalry, and it's the same system I just handed to our Camp 2 and above members in the 8,000er expedition. Because, as always, when I find a fast, easy, simple, AI-influenced tool that I've created for our own business, I immediately hand it off to the people in our 8,000er expedition because I never want to hoard a good thing. So if I sat there, took the time to solve a problem for us, I'm just going to go ahead and share that so nobody else has to recreate the wheel. So basically, this starts before the evaluation ever happens with something a lot of owners skip, and that is a written job description for every single role. So back in episode 14 of the Business Mountain podcast, I talked to you all about how to make an org chart. So that's going to be your very first step. So if we take a step backwards and then backwards again, I really need you to start with your org chart. And everything you need to make your org chart is right in that episode. So no secrets. I'm not holding anything back here. You have all the things. Then take every single role in your org chart and create a job description for that role. In that job description, you're going to explain exactly what that role is for, all of the duties that they have to do in that role, and how they're held accountable. So you're also going to include any KPIs that you have for that role. And by KPI, I mean key process indicator. So these are things that you're going to measure so that you know whether that role is doing a good job or whether they're being successful. You cannot fairly evaluate someone against expectations that only exist in your head. So if it was never written down, then it was never really a fair expectation. It was a hope. It was something that you just thought in your mind. The job description comes first. So if you heard that org chart episode a while back, this is where that work pays off. Then the evaluation itself has 3 parts. The first part that we evaluate is our mission, vision, and values. And that is another episode of the Business Mountain podcast. That, my friend, is episode number 3. So there's a lot of work to be done before you get to this point. And this is the reason why we have the camps that we have. So if you're at base camp, one of the main things that you need to figure out is your mission, vision, and your values. So that when you start serving your clients in Camp 1, you've got something to guide you along the way. You've got something to let you know what you're doing, what you stand for, who you want to serve, all of those things. So if you're doing things in the right succession, you will have built these things along the way before you ever even have a team that you need to evaluate. So we did our mission, vision, and values a long time ago, and we revisit that every year. And that is the first thing that we look at when we're evaluating our team members. We score every single team member on how they live out our mission, our vision, and each of our core values. And I want to pause here because this is the part that shocks people. Your values are not wall art. If service and perseverance and faith matter enough to put on your wall, then they matter enough to talk about by name with every person on your team twice a year. And I would argue you need to be reading these out loud at every single meeting that you have with your team. We do. Every time we meet as a team, we read our mission, vision, and values out loud. Everybody knows what they are. They know what we expect. And so then when we sit down and talk about it as part of our evaluation, it's not a big surprise. This is how culture stops being a poster and it starts being a practice. So we literally go through each section and we score everybody on a scale of 0 to 3. So we go through our mission statement, we read it out loud, and then we score that particular person 0 if they're not trying at all. And I'll tell you, it's hard to get a 0 at Cavalry Appliance. You really have to be not trying. 1 means they're learning. 2 means they're winning. And a 3 means they're leading, which means they're an example for other people on the team to look up to. They set the standard. They're just killing it if they're getting a 3. So we read our mission statement out loud, and then we give them a score. And sometimes we're between 2 levels, and we might score them a 2.5 if they're doing a really great job and they're on their way to be a leader in that area. We'll score them a 2.5 or something like that. So you can have some discretion with how you score people. Then we look at our vision. Same thing. We read the vision statement out loud, and we think about where they fall on the spectrum between 0 and 3. Now, if somebody scores higher than a 2 or lower than a 1, we're going to want to make some type of comment about why. Also, if somebody scored a 2 at some point and they went down a half a point or more, we're going to want to make a comment there also so that they can understand what happened to affect their score and what changed it. So I hope that makes sense so far. Then we're going to look at our values. We're going to read each of our values out loud. So for example, at Cavalry Appliance Service, one of our values is perseverance. And so we'll think about examples of how somebody kept on trying something that was a challenge for them and they didn't give up. And if they're not trying and they give up really easily, then that's something we can note there as well. And it's something, if they're not doing great, if they're doing less than a 2, then we want to be able to share with them some suggestions on how they could make their score higher next time. So that's part 1. Part 1 is mission, vision, and values. And we go through each and every piece of that one at a time, and we score each one. Part 2 is job duties. One section for every role the person holds. Now, in a small business like ours, sometimes that means that our people are wearing multiple hats. For example, our daughter Logan, who just came on full-time after graduating from college this past May, holds 3 separate positions. First of all, she's the bookkeeping assistant. Second of all, she helps Maggie in the office in the mornings, especially answering the phone, and she's in charge of the hospitality in the co-working space as well. So we call that the office assistant. Then she's also our marketing manager. So Logan has 3 job descriptions on her evaluation, with all of the duties for each one being evaluated separately. Every role the person holds, every single line-by-line duty that role is expected to do, and each one gets evaluated on its own terms because each hat has its own standard. So that means that sometimes, especially for somebody who is in a new role, like Logan is, for instance, she might score lower than a 2 at something because she might actually be learning. And remember, a 1 is learning. So none of this is punitive. This is purely scoring so that people know where they stand at all times, and they always have an opportunity to work and improve themselves. Part 3 is professional goals. During the first year, the standing goal is simple. Become fully trained and ready to fully function in that role. After that, at the end of every evaluation year, that team member sets goals for the coming year. And we write them as SMART goals, of course. For every goal, we define in writing what meets that goal and what it looks like to exceed that goal. So a little later, halfway through the year, and also at the end of the year, there's no debate and no fuzzy memory about what the expectation was. So, for example, our technicians this year have the goal of passing the certification exam at the PSA conference that we're going to in September. That is a really clear goal. So if they were to pass that and get a certification, that would be a 2. That would be winning. And if they also pass it, but they pass it with flying colors and they get a certificate for a master technician certification, well, that would be a 3, and that would be exceeding the goal. So it's really important to give people very clear expectations of what success looks like for each and every metric on the list. Now, when we're scoring them, and every single line has the score from 0 to 3, and just to remind you, 0 means they're not trying. In fact, they're probably trying not to do well if they're scoring a 0. 1 is learning. 2 is winning, which means they've mastered whatever that line item is. And a 3 is leading. And that means you're not just exceeding the standard, you're the person that is training other people to the standard. Do you hear the dignity in that language? Nobody on your team is a 2 out of 5. They're either learning, or they're winning, or they're leading. And that language matters, and we chose that really purposely. Half points are fair game because real people sometimes live between the numbers. Now for the cadence, New team members get evaluated at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. That's the probationary rhythm, and it means a brand new hire never goes more than a month in their first season without a structured conversation about how it's going. And that really was important for us when we were working on finding a technician before we hired Austin. We literally had 3 technicians that we went through before we settled on Austin. The first one was wonderful. We thought he was fantastic. Unfortunately, he had an illness in his family and he had to move to Texas shortly after we hired him. So that was a bummer. The next technician, this is where this 30, 60, and 90-day probationary period was probably the most important thing that we've ever experienced as far as our team member growth. Because for this technician, it was really hard. He was a really nice guy, but the numbers told us, based on where he was at his 30 days and where he was at his 60 days, that there really wasn't any growth and improvement, and that the knowledge that he should have been developing over that time period wasn't really sticking. And so while our feelings told us that maybe we should hang on a little longer because, like I said, he was a really nice guy, the paper indicated differently, and we had to make the difficult decision to let him go and let him find something that he could really thrive at. So 30, 60, and 90 days of feedback allows somebody to really understand whether this position is good for them, and it allows us to find out whether what they're doing is going to serve the company well and the rest of our team really well. Because remember, as business owners, whether we like it or not, sometimes we have to make really hard decisions to protect the business, because if we don't protect the business, then we're not protecting the jobs of all of the other people on the team as well. After that, we do it twice a year. Semi-annual after the second quarter of the year, which is the round we just finished, and end of year after the fourth quarter. So let me break all of this down to its essence. Written expectations. 3 parts: values, duties, and goals. A scoring language with dignity, a predictable rhythm, and that is the whole framework. Simple enough to run in a 3-person shop, strong enough to scale with you all the way up the mountain. So, what does that look like in practice? Well, let me take you inside the actual sit-down, because the document is only half of the system. The conversation is the other half. So picture a service business owner. Let's call her the owner of a small plumbing company sitting down for a semi-annual with her lead tech. The evaluation is already filled out before the meeting. She's scored every line, and there are a few rules we follow about comments that change everything. Remember, like I said earlier, any score above a 2 gets a written comment. You don't just hand somebody a 3 and move on. You want to write down why. What specifically did they do that made them the standard setter? Because here's what Ken Blanchard teaches in the 1-Minute Manager. Catch people doing something right. Most managers spend all their energy catching people doing something wrong. This system forces you in the very best way possible to put the wins in writing. And let me tell you, watching someone read a specific, true, written compliment about their own work is one of the great joys of leading a team. It hits different than a passing good job in the hallway. It's on paper, it's signed, it's real. Rule 2, like I said earlier, any score that dropped since the last evaluation gets a written comment as well, no matter how small the drop. If somebody went from a 2.5 to a 2, you owe them an explanation of what changed. No silent slides. This is how you catch a small drift before it becomes a pattern, and it's how your team learns that scores are honest and not just vibes. Rule 3, anything scored below a 1 gets a comment too. Because if there's a real problem, it deserves real words, written down, not a number left to just do the talking on its own. Now the conversation itself. You go through it together, line by line, out loud. And this is where I want to bring in Kim Scott, who wrote a book called Radical Candor that you may have heard of. Her whole framework comes down to 2 things at once: care personally and challenge directly. Most of us are good at one or the other. The owner who challenges directly but doesn't care personally comes across as a bully, and people quit. But Scott says the more common failure for people like us, people who genuinely love our teams, is the opposite one. She calls it ruinous empathy. That's when you care about someone so much that you can't bring yourself to tell them the truth. So you stay vague. You soften everything into mush, and then they never get the information that they need to grow. Ruinous empathy feels like kindness in the moment. It's actually the least kind thing you can do, because you're watching someone walk towards a cliff and complimenting their pace. The evaluation structure protects you from both failures. The written scores force the direct challenge. The sit-down, eye-to-eye, with celebration built in, carries the personal care. You don't have to be naturally gifted at hard conversations. The structure holds the conversation for you. 2 more pieces I don't want you to miss, because they do the heavy lifting. First, compliments from coworkers. Before we finalize an evaluation, we gather any shout-outs from teammates or customers and we record them, word for word, right in the document. We have something at Cavalry called Cavalry Kudos cards, and it's something we came up as a team. We have little sheets of paper, and throughout the week, people can write down little shout-outs for each other. Something like dealing with a difficult customer, picking up an extra call so someone can make it to their daughter's birthday party. Anything like that we do regularly for each other just to help make it a really great place to work. So the team member isn't just hearing from the boss. They're hearing that their teammates see them too. If you want to build team engagement, and that's one of your 16 categories on the mountain, this one habit will do that more than a year of pizza parties. Second, and this one is big, we tie the evaluation to profit share. At Cavalry, every score across all 3 parts get averaged into one final number. And a team member needs a 2.0 or better, a winning average, to be eligible for profit share. Plus, they have to have worked the entire year, or almost the entire year at least, of the year that we're doing the profit share for. So what does that look like in practice? It means the money is not a mystery. Nobody is wondering why one person got a bonus and the other didn't. And nobody thinks it comes down to who the boss likes. The scorecard is objective. Both people signed it, and the path to the money runs straight through it. And I'll tell you again, that score being objective is a game changer when you have to make really difficult hiring, firing decisions in your team. If you've ever felt awkward about compensation conversations, this practice removes the awkwardness because the system answers the question before anyone has to even ask it. And then at the bottom of the document, there are 2 signature lines. The evaluator signs, the team member signs, and there's something almost sacred about that moment. Both names on the same page. It says, we looked at this together honestly, and we're still on the same page. Then you file it. And here's why that matters too. Next time, every prior score is sitting right there next to the new one. Trends start to appear. Growth becomes visible. Or the opposite, if somebody isn't growing, that becomes visible too. That team member who was learning across half the page at their 90-day, and now they're winning almost everywhere at year end, that's exciting, and you can show them their own climb. It's very powerful to hand that to somebody. Now, I want to lift this above the mechanics for just a minute, because if you take one thing away from today, I want it to be this. An evaluation is not an inspection. It's an act of stewardship. The people on your team are not line items on your payroll report. They are people God has placed in your care for this season of their lives. They have families, mortgages, dreams, doubts. They spend more waking hours inside your business than almost anywhere else on earth. And you, my friend, have real influence over whether those hours grow them or grind them down. That is not a burden. That is an honor. It's one of the most meaningful parts of owning a business, and I don't want you to miss the joy of it because a form felt intimidating. Brené Brown puts it in 3 words in her book, Dare to Lead. Clear is kind. And she finishes the thought, unclear is unkind. When you tell someone the truth about their performance with care, with specifics, with a path forward, you are being kind. When you spare them the truth to spare yourself that conversation, you're not being gentle. You're being unclear. And remember, unclear is unkind. So here's the reframe. Stop thinking of evaluations as judgment you deliver and start thinking of them as clarity you owe your team members. Your learning people deserve to know where they're learning and exactly what winning looks like. Your winning people deserve to hear that they're winning out loud in writing. And your leading people, oh my friend, your leading people deserve to be told that they are the standard. Say it to them. Sign your name under it. And remember, sometimes your leading people, they might be leading in one area and learning in another area because we're people, we're complex, we're really great at some things and we really struggle at other things. And that's okay because here we're trying to support each other and we're all growing together. One conversation done with love and structure twice a year. That's the whole thing. Not a new department, not a software, a table, a document, and the truth spoken with care. So here's what I'd love for you to do this week. I want you to pick one team member, maybe your best one, and ask yourself, could I show them on paper exactly where they stand? If the answer is no, you just found your next piece of work on the mountain, and it's really good work. Inside the 8,000er expedition, this is exactly the kind of system that we build together. And our Camp 2 and above members are already running this very evaluation process in their own businesses with tools I've handed them. They didn't have to build this whole thing on their own. If you're wondering whether you're ready for that kind of climb, take the Find Your Camp quiz at outcomeacademy.com/findmycamp, and it'll show you right where you're standing. Your team is worth this conversation, my friend. Go have it. Before you go, here's your next step. Take the free Find Your Camp quiz at outcomeacademy.com/findmycamp. In about 2 minutes, it shows you exactly where you are on the mountain and which path fits you best. Whether that's the 8,000er expedition, the compound marketing machine, or one of our other resources. And if this show is helping you, follow it wherever you listen. Subscribe on YouTube and share it with a business owner who needs it. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'm super grateful for you, and I'll see you in the next episode.